Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
On the luminous world of Lithera, perfection was not a goal. It was a requirement. Cities floated like constellations, suspended in a sky that shimmered with soft violet light. Every structure was grown, not built. Every being was engineered for purpose. There was no hunger, no chaos, no uncertainty, and no mistakes. Zyra stood rigidly at the center of the council chamber, her silver eyes fixed forward. Beside her, Elune trembled, barely perceptible to most, but to Zyra it was unmistakable. The chamber itself was alive, its walls pulsing faintly as if listening. 12 figures hovered in a circular formation above them. The Council of Harmonics, the highest authority on Lithera. Their forms were elongated, elegant, and faceless save for shifting patterns of light that reflected their thoughts. "You have violated Directive 7, the High Arbiter intoned, its voice resonating not through sound, but directly within their minds. Non-interference with emergent civilizations. Elune swallowed, her glow flickering. "We only observed at first. We were careful. You transmitted a signal," another council member interrupted. "A direct anomaly within Earth's electromagnetic field." "It was small," Elune insisted. "Just a pulse." "Enough," Zyra said sharply, cutting her off. Elune turned toward her, startled. Zyra stepped forward, her posture unyielding. "The fault is mine. I authorized the transmission." That wasn't entirely true. It had been a shared decision, born from late cycles of curiosity and fascination. But Zyra understood something Elune didn't yet. Lithera didn't care about intent, only consequence. The council's lights dimmed slightly, as if considering. "Explain your reasoning," the High Arbiter demanded. Zyra hesitated. Because how could she explain curiosity to beings who had outgrown it? "We studied Earth Force cycles," she began. "Their development is inefficient, chaotic, but there is something unique in their unpredictability. We believed. You believed you were entitled to interfere." Another voice cut in. "No," Zyra said firmly. "We believe we can understand them." Silence followed. Heavy, absolute. Then, "You sought to understand imperfection," the High Arbiter said slowly. "A concept Lithera eliminated long ago." Elune stepped forward now, unable to stay silent. "Maybe that was a mistake." Zyra's eyes widened slightly. "That was dangerous." But Elune continued, her voice gaining strength. "They feel things we don't. They change. They grow without design. Maybe there's something we lost." The chamber dimmed further. Not anger. Something colder. Disapproval. "You speak of regression as if it were evolution," a council member said. "Emotion is instability. Instability leads to collapse." "And yet they haven't collapsed," Elune replied. Zyra reached for her arm, but it was too late. The decision had already been made. "Zyra and Elune of Lithera," the High Arbiter declared, its voice now absolute. "You have demonstrated deviation from harmonic alignment. The air tightened around them. You will be repurposed." Elune's glow flickered violently. "Repurpose how?" The chamber shifted. The vast expanse of Lithera's skyline appeared around them, endless, flawless, distant. Then it fractured, replaced by something else. Blue skies, clouds, wind, a planet below, wild and unstructured. "Earth," Zyra whispered. "You sought to understand them," the Arbiter said. "Now you will." Elune's breath caught. "You mean observe?" "No," the Arbiter replied. A pause. Then, "You will live among them." The words hit harder than any physical force. "Without enhancement," another council member added. "Without guidance. Without return until your dissonance is resolved." Zyra's composure cracked for the first time. "You're stripping our abilities?" "Yes." "Our connection to the network?" "Yes." Elune shook her head. "You can't do that. We won't survive." "Survival," the Arbiter interrupted, "is part of the lesson." The chamber began to dissolve. Light fractured into spirals around them. "This is not justice," Zyra said, her voice low. "This is correction," the Arbiter replied. The transition was violent. Lithra's seamless teleportation was always smooth, controlled. This wasn't. This felt like being torn apart and reassembled incorrectly. Zyra hit the ground hard. Air rushed into her lungs. Too fast, too sharp. Pain. Real pain. Elune, she gasped, forcing herself up. Nearby, Elune lay sprawled in a patch of grass, blinking rapidly. I can't feel the network, she whispered. It's gone. Zyra looked at her own hands. The faint glow that once pulsed beneath her skin was barely visible now, like a dying ember. The world around them was overwhelming. The scent of earth, the sound of wind moving through trees, the uneven ground beneath their feet. Everything was raw, unfiltered. This is Earth, Zyra said, her voice tight. Above them, the sky stretched endlessly, bright blue, with clouds drifting freely, unconstrained by design. Elune slowly sat up, staring at it in awe. It's beautiful. Zyra frowned. It's unstable. A sudden gust of wind made Elune laugh in surprise. Zyra stiffened. What was that? I don't know, Elune said, still smiling. It just felt good. Zyra stared at her. Already, something was changing. Hours passed. Or maybe less. Time felt different here. Unstructured, unmeasured. Zyra's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp, unfamiliar sensation in her abdomen. She froze. Elune, she said slowly. Something is wrong. Elune looked over, concerned. What is it? Zyra pressed a hand to her stomach. There's a tightening. Discomfort. Elune's eyes widened. I think I have it too. They exchanged a look. Then, almost simultaneously, hunger, they said. The realization was unsettling. On Lithra, sustenance was automatic. Energy was maintained through the network. There was no need, no lack. Here, their bodies demanded. This is inefficient, Zyra muttered, though her voice lacked conviction. Elune stood, brushing grass from her unfamiliar clothing. Then we'll figure out. Zyra looked at her sharply. You're not concerned? I am, Elune admitted, but also curious. Zyra exhaled slowly. That curiosity is what got us here. Elune smiled faintly. Maybe it's also what will help us survive. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they stood at the edge of the forest. In the distance, lights flickered to life. A human settlement. Zyra studied it carefully. That's where we'll find resources. Elune nodded. And answers. Zyra glanced back once. At the sky, at the stars beginning to appear. Somewhere out there was Lithra. Perfect. Distant. Gone. She turned away. Let's go. And together, they stepped toward a world they were never meant to be part of, a world that would change them forever. The town was called Larkspur. Zyra learned that from a faded wooden sign at the edge of the road, though the letters were uneven and chipped, something that would never exist on Lithra. Imperfection was everywhere here. Even the name of a place could decay. It's inefficient, she muttered for the 10th time that day. Elune, walking beside her, tilted her head. Or it changes over time. That's not the same thing. Zyra didn't respond. They stepped onto a narrow street lined with small buildings, each one different. Different shapes, different colors, different levels of wear. Nothing matched, nothing aligned. And yet, people moved through it effortlessly. Humans passed by, talking, laughing, carrying objects, glancing at glowing rectangles in their hands. No shared network. No unified system. Just independence. It was unsettling. Their first real problem became obvious almost immediately. Hunger. It returned stronger this time. Sharp, insistent. Zyra pressed her hand against her abdomen again. This condition is worsening. Elune nodded. We need to find sustenance. They watched as people entered a small building with a sign that read, Cafe. Moments later, those same people emerged holding cups, food, looking satisfied. This appears to be a distribution center, Zyra concluded. Let's try, Elune said. Inside, the cafe was warm, filled with unfamiliar scents, rich, bitter, sweet. The air buzzed with quiet conversation and the low hum of machines. Zyra immediately tensed. Too many variables. Too many unknowns. Elun, however, looked delighted. "It smells alive," she whispered. Zyra didn't know what that meant. They approached the counter, where a human stood behind a machine, tapping on a screen. "Hi, what can I get you?" he asked casually. Elun smiled politely. "We require food." The man blinked. Okay. What kind?" Elun froze. Zyra stepped in. "Nutritionally efficient sustenance." "Right," the man said slowly. "We got sandwiches, pastries, coffee." Zyra scanned the items displayed behind him. None of them were labeled in terms she understood. Elun pointed randomly. "That one." "2 croissants?" the man asked. "Yes," Elun said confidently. "That'll be 8.50. Silence. Zyra narrowed her eyes. 8.50, what? Euros? Zyra and Elun exchanged a look. Currency. Of course. They had studied it. Abstractly. But understanding a concept and needing it to survive were very different things. Zyra reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, glowing crystal, one of the few items that had transferred with them. "This has high energy density," she said, placing it on the counter. "It should be sufficient." The man stared at it. "Is that prop?" "It is not a prop," Zyra replied. "Cool," he said, "but I can't take that." Elun leaned in slightly. "Why not?" "Because it's not money." Zyra felt irritation rise. "It has value." "Not here, it doesn't." A pause. Then, "Next, please." They were gently pushed aside. Outside, Elun looked down at the untouched crystal in Zyra's hand. That didn't work. Zyra exhaled sharply. This system is illogical. Value should be intrinsic, not assigned. "But it's not," Elun said softly. "Not here." Zyra looked back at the cafe, where people continued buying food effortlessly. "We need their system," she admitted reluctantly. The next challenge was shelter. Night came faster than expected. Temperature dropped. Another unfamiliar sensation. Cold. Elun wrapped her arms around herself. "Why does the environment fluctuate like this?" "Because it's poorly regulated," Zyra replied, though she was shivering too. They wandered until they found a small park. A bench offered minimal relief. "This is unacceptable," Zyra said, sitting stiffly. Elun leaned back, staring at the sky. Stars, different from Lithera's, less structured, more scattered. "They're not arranged," Elun murmured. "They're just there." Zyra followed her gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. Morning brought new problems and unexpected solutions. They were sitting on the same bench, exhausted and hungry, when a voice interrupted them. "You two okay?" They looked up. A girl stood in front of them, maybe a few years older than most humans they had observed. She had short dark hair, grease-stained hands, and a curious expression. Zyra immediately went on guard. "Define okay." The girl raised an eyebrow. "I'll take that as a no." Elun smiled faintly. "We are adapting." "Right," the girl said slowly. "You don't look like you're from around here." "That is correct," Zyra replied. The girl laughed. "Yeah, I figured." She crouched down slightly, studying them. "I'm Mira," she said. "You got names?" "Elun." "Zyra." Mira nodded. "Well, Elun and Zyra, you look like you haven't eaten in a while." Zyra hesitated. Trust was not something Lytherans practiced. But hunger made decisions more complicated. "We have encountered difficulty acquiring food," she admitted. Mira smirked. "That's a fancy way of saying you're broke." Zyra frowned. "We are not broken." Mira laughed again. "No, I mean, never mind." She stood up and gestured. "Come on, I'll get you something to eat." Zyra stiffened. "Why?" Mira shrugged. "Because you need help. That is not a sufficient reason." "It is for me." Elun stood, without hesitation. "We accept." Zyra looked at her sharply. "Elun." "We need to survive," Elun said quietly. "And she's offering help." Zyra hesitated, then, reluctantly, stood as well. "Fine." The cafe felt different the second time. Less intimidating. Still confusing. Mira ordered for them. 3 sandwiches, she told the man at the counter. "And coffee." This time, She handed over small pieces of paper and coins. Transaction complete. Simple. Zyra watched carefully. Every detail mattered. They sat at a small table. Elun picked up the sandwich cautiously. "This is acceptable?" she asked. Mira grinned. "Just eat it." Elun took a bite and froze. Zyra leaned forward. "What is it?" Elun's eyes widened. "It's incredible." Zyra immediately took a bite of her own. The flavors hit instantly. Complex, layered, overwhelming. She paused. Processing. Then, "This is inefficient," she said. Mira smirked. "You like it?" Zyra didn't respond, but she didn't stop eating. Over the next few days, Mira became their anchor. She explained money, work, basic human behavior. "You can't just say things like nutritionally efficient sustenance," she told Zyra. "People will think you're weird." "They already do," Zyra replied. "Fair point." Elun adapted quickly. She smiled more, asked questions, watched everything. Zyra struggled, but she learned, observed, adjusted. One afternoon, while Mira was busy at her repair shop, Elun wandered off. Curiosity, always curiosity. She found herself back at the cafe, staring at the vending machine outside. It fascinated her, a machine that dispensed food in exchange for currency. Simple, predictable. She inserted a coin Mira had given her earlier, pressed a button. Nothing happened. She pressed another. Still nothing. She pressed all of them, systematically, repeatedly. You've been at that for a while." Elun turned. A boy stood nearby, watching her with amused curiosity. "I have followed the instructions," she said. "It does not respond." He stepped closer, glancing at the machine. "You gotta pick one thing," he said. "Not all of them." "I did not know that constraint." He smiled. "Yeah, machines are kind of picky." He pressed a single button. The machine whirred. A snack dropped. Elun's eyes lit up. "It worked." "Usually does." She looked at him carefully. "You understand the system?" "More or less." She nodded thoughtfully. "That is useful." He laughed softly. "I guess it is." A pause. Then, "I'm Kai," he said. "Elun." "Nice to meet you, Elun." She studied his expression. Warm, open, unstructured, different from anything she had known. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she didn't want to look away. From a distance, Zyra watched. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Attachment," she murmured to herself. "Dangerous. Unpredictable. Human." She crossed her arms. "This will complicate everything." But deep down, she wasn't entirely sure that was a bad thing anymore. Time on Earth didn't move like it did on Lithra. There were no cycles marked by collective awareness, no synchronized transitions shared across every mind. Instead, time slipped forward quietly, measuring sunrises, conversations, habits forming without permission. Days became weeks. And somehow, without either of them noticing exactly when it happened, Larkspur began to feel less like a place they were stranded in, and more like a place they belonged. Zyra stood beneath the open hood of a broken car, her hand steady, her mind focused. "You're telling me it just stopped?" she asked. The owner, an older man with tired eyes, nodded. "Yeah, just died on me this morning." Zyra examined the engine, her gaze sharp, primitive, inefficient, but logical. That was the surprising part. Human technology lacked refinement, but it wasn't chaotic. It was evolving, piece by piece. Trial and error, failure and correction. She reached into the engine, adjusting a loose connection. "Try again," she said. The man turned the key. The engine roared back to life. He blinked in disbelief. "That's it? That's all it was?" "Yes," Zyra said simply. He laughed, relief flooding his face. "You've got a gift." Zyra paused. "A gift? On Lithra, abilities were assigned, designed. Here, they were discovered." "I observed patterns," she replied. "Call it whatever you want," he said. "You're good." As he drove off, Mira leaned against the shop wall, arms crossed, smiling. "You're getting popular," she said. Zyra frowned slightly. "Popularity is irrelevant." "Sure," Mira said. That's why you fixed 12 cars this week. Zyra didn't answer. Instead, she glanced around the shop, the scattered tools, the worn floor, the faint smell of oil and metal. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, and for the first time in her existence, she felt something unfamiliar. Satisfaction. Across town, Elune stood at the edge of the ocean. The first time she saw it, she couldn't speak. Now she still couldn't, but for a different reason. Kai stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching her instead of the waves. "You do that a lot," he said. "Do what?" Elune asked softly. "Look at things like they're new." "They are new," she replied. Kai smiled. "Yeah, but most people stop noticing after a while." Elune shook her head slightly. "I don't think I want to stop." The wind moved through her hair, carrying the scent of salt and water. "It changes constantly," she continued. "The patterns, the movement, it's never the same twice." "That's the ocean," Kai said. "It's alive," she whispered. Kai looked out at the waves, then back at her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I guess it is." They started spending more time together after that. At first, it was accidental, then intentional, then inevitable. Kai showed her things, small, ordinary things that felt extraordinary through her eyes. Street markets. Music played from old speakers. Late-night walks under dim streetlights. Elune asked questions about everything. Why do people laugh when nothing logical has happened? Why do you listen to the same song multiple times? Why does this food taste different every time I eat it? Kai never had perfect answers, but he tried, and somehow that mattered more. One evening, they sat on a quiet hill overlooking the town. Lights flickered below like scattered stars. Elune hugged her knees, watching silently. "Kai," she said after a long pause. "Yeah. Do humans always feel this much?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, searching for words. "Everything feels intense. Happiness, sadness, curiosity. Even silence feels like something." Kai leaned back on his hands. "Yeah," he said. "That's kind of the deal." She looked at him. "Doesn't it get overwhelming?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But it's also what makes things matter." Elune considered that. "On my world," she said slowly, "we removed instability. We thought it made us better." Kai turned toward her. "And did it?" She looked down. "I don't know anymore." At the repair shop, Zyra was having a different kind of realization. Mira tossed her a cloth. "You missed a spot." Zyra caught it effortlessly. "Irrelevant." Customers notice. Zyra wiped her hands, though she didn't fully understand why it mattered. "Why do you care what they notice?" she asked. Mira shrugged. "Because it makes them feel good." "That is not a functional metric." Mira smirked. "You'd be surprised." A customer approached, thanking Zyra again for fixing his car. His gratitude was genuine, unnecessary, but genuine. Zyra watched him leave, thoughtful. "They trust me," she said. "Yeah," Mira replied. "Why?" "Because you helped them." Zyra frowned slightly. "That is the expected outcome of a service." Mira shook her head. "No, it's more than that. You care if it works." Zyra opened her mouth to argue, then stopped, because she did. That night, Zyra found Elune sitting outside, staring at the sky again. "You've been spending time with a human," Zyra said. "Elune," she corrected gently. Zyra sighed. "You know what I mean." "Yes," Elune said. "I have." Zyra crossed her arms. "You're forming an attachment." Elune didn't deny it. "Yes." Zyra blinked. "You acknowledge it?" "I do." "That is unwise." Elune smiled faintly. "Why?" "Because it creates variables we cannot control." Elune looked back at the stars. Maybe not everything needs to be controlled. Zyra was quiet for a moment. That mindset is what led to our exile. Elune turned to her. "And what if our exile is what led us to something better?" Zyra didn't respond, because for the first time, she didn't have a counter-argument. Days later, everything changed. It began with the sky. A ripple, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Zyra felt it immediately. Her entire body tensed. "Elune," she said sharply, Elun looked up. The air itself seemed to distort, bending around a growing point of light. Recognition hit instantly. "No," Elun whispered. The light expanded, tearing open a familiar fracture in reality. A portal, Lithuran, cold, precise, unforgiving. Two figures emerged, their forms glowing with the same controlled brilliance Zyra and Elun had once carried. Envoys. Zyra stepped forward instinctively, her expression hardening. "You've come for us." "Yes," one of the envoys replied, its voice echoing with the same detached clarity as the council. "Your term has concluded." Elun's heart dropped. "Already, you have been observed," the envoy continued. "Your exposure is sufficient." Zyra's mind raced. Sufficient? That was it? After everything, after learning, adapting, changing, it was just over? "You'll return immediately," the envoy said. Elun took a step back. "No." The word slipped out before she could stop it. Zyra turned sharply. "Elun." "I'm not ready," Elun said, her voice shaking. "I don't understand this place yet. I don't understand myself yet." "That is irrelevant," the envoy replied. "Your presence here was corrective, not permanent." Kai arrived moments later, breathless. "Elun," he called. "What's going on?" He stopped when he saw the envoys. "The light, the impossible." "What is that?" he whispered. Elun looked at him. Fear, confusion, and something else. Something stronger. Zyra saw it, and for the first time, she understood exactly what was happening. "Return," the envoy repeated. Zyra looked at the portal, then at Mira, standing at a distance, stunned, then at Elun, then at Kai. Two worlds, one choice. For the first time in her existence, Zyra hesitated, and that hesitation changed everything. The portal pulsed like a wound in the sky. Cold light spilled across the ground, washing out the warm tones of sunset. The air felt sharper near it, clean, controlled, sterile, familiar, unforgiving. Zyra stood at its edge, her expression unreadable, her mind racing faster than it ever had on Lithera. Behind her, Larkspur breathed, messy, imperfect, alive. In front of her, perfection. The envoys hovered just beyond the threshold, their forms steady, their presence absolute. "Step forward," one of them said. It wasn't a request. Elun's hand trembled as she reached for Kai. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she whispered. Kai's eyes were fixed on the portal, then on the beings beyond it, then back to her. "Find out what?" he asked, his voice unsteady. "What are you?" Elun hesitated. On Lithera, truth was immediate, shared, understood. Here, it had weight, consequences. "I'm not from here," she said softly. "Not from Earth." Kai let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah," he said. "I figured something was different." Elun's chest tightened. "Does that scare you?" Kai looked at her, really looked. "No," he said. "Losing you does." Her breath caught. Emotion surged again, stronger than ever, undeniable now. Zyra watched them, something shifting inside her. "Your delay is inefficient," the envoy stated. "Proceed." Zyra turned slowly. "I have a question," she said. The envoys paused. "State it." Zyra gestured toward the town, toward the people gathering at a distance, Mira among them, watching with wide, uncertain eyes. "You said our exposure was sufficient," Zyra continued. "Define sufficient." The envoy's glow flickered faintly. "You have experienced instability. You have observed emotional variance. Your deviation should now be corrected." "Corrected," Zyra repeated. Her gaze hardened. "You mean erased?" "Realigned," the envoy replied. Zyra let out a slow breath. On Lithera, that word meant everything returning to its proper state. No deviation, no growth, no change. She looked down at her hands. Still dim, still limited. And yet, she had done more here than she ever had there. Fix things, help people, chosen actions, not because they were assigned, but because they mattered. Mira stepped forward suddenly. "Hey," she called out. "Someone want to explain what the hell is going on." The envoys turned slightly, acknowledging her presence for the first time. Local interference is irrelevant. One said. Hey, I'm not irrelevant, Mira snapped. Zyra almost smiled. Almost. These beings intend to return us to our origin, Zyra explained. Return you? Mira said. Like take you away? Yes. Mira looked between them, her expression tightening. And you're just going? Zyra hesitated. That hesitation said everything. Elune stepped forward now, her voice stronger. No, she said. The word echoed. Firm. Certain. I'm not going back. The envoy's light sharpened instantly. Refusal is not permitted. It is, Elune replied quietly, because I'm choosing it. Choice, the envoy said, almost as if testing the word, a flawed construct. Maybe, Elune said, but it's mine. She turned to Zyra. You said this place was inefficient, she said softly, that it didn't make sense. It doesn't, Zyra replied. And yet, Elune gestured around them. Look at what it created. Zyra followed her gaze. Mira, standing her ground, even when she didn't understand. Kai, refusing to walk away, even when he should be afraid. The town, watching, uncertain but present. Connections, unpredictable, unstructured, real. You are deviating further, the envoy warned. Zyra looked back at them. For the first time, she said slowly, I understand something Lithra does not. Clarify. Zyra took a step back from the portal. Then another. Perfection is static, she said. It does not change. It does not grow. The envoys remained silent. This world is flawed, Zyra continued. Unstable, inefficient. A pause. Then, but it's alive. The word hung in the air. Different from anything Lithra valued. Different from anything she had ever believed. Final directive, the envoy said, its voice colder now. Return or be permanently severed from Lithra. Elune didn't hesitate. I choose Earth. Zyra closed her eyes briefly. One last moment. One last calculation. Two outcomes. Return to certainty. Or remain in chaos. On Lithra, the answer would have been obvious. Here, it wasn't. She opened her eyes. For the first time, she said quietly, I am not choosing the optimal path. She looked at Elune, at Mira, at this strange, imperfect world that had somehow changed her. I'm choosing my path. And she stepped away from the portal. The light flickered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the portal began to collapse. The envoy's forms destabilized. Connections severed, one of them stated. Exile confirmed, said the other. And just like that, they were gone. The sky returned to normal. The air softened. The world breathed again. Silence followed. Heavy, uncertain. Then, Mira exhaled loudly. Okay, what just happened? Zyra looked at her. We stayed. Mira blinked. Yeah, I got that part. Elune laughed softly. A real laugh. Uncontrolled. Free. Kai stepped closer. Still processing. Still overwhelmed. So you're not leaving? Elune shook her head. No. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Good, he said. Days passed. Then weeks. Then years. Zyra expanded the repair shop, turning it into something more efficient. Yet still undeniably human. She never admitted it, but she started caring about things like customer satisfaction. Mira noticed. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Elune stayed curious. Always. But now, she didn't just observe. She participated. She laughed more, felt more, loved more. And sometimes, late at night, the two of them would sit together under the open sky. No portal, no summons, no expectations. Just stars. Scattered, unstructured, beautiful. Do you ever miss it? Elune asked once. Zyra thought for a long time, then shook her head. No, she said. And for once, there was no hesitation, because what had once been their punishment had become their choice, and in choosing it, they had finally become something Lithra could never design. Human,